The heavy metal shovel struck the massive dog's ribs with a sickening hollow sound that echoed through the storm. The dog didn't growl, and he didn't try to fight back. He simply collapsed into the cold, unforgiving mud, his mouth opening in a silent scream of agony as the pain tore through his body. But what happened next was something that would haunt the witnesses for years. The filthy, battered animal didn't run away to save himself. Dragging his paralyzed hind legs, coughing up blood and shaking violently, he crawled back to the very hole he was digging. He refused to quit, driven by a power stronger than fear. "Stupid beast," laughed the man standing over him. It was Brutus, the drunken cemetery guard, a man whose heart was as cold as the grave he was protecting. He raised the heavy weapon again, grinning madly. "You want more, you filth? I'll bury you right here alongside the bones you're trying to steal." Nearby, a group of teenagers stood under the shelter of an old oak tree, filming the torture on their phones. They weren't horrified by the cruelty. They were entertained by it. "Finish him," they cheered, their faces illuminated by the ghostly glow of their screens. In that moment, the world seemed completely drained of all mercy. The dog's paws were raw and bleeding, his nails completely torn off from clawing at the hard, rocky earth. He dug frantically, crying with every desperate scoop of mud. He knew, with an instinctual certainty, that he had only seconds left before the shovel came down again to end his life. Brutus sneered, spitting into the rain. He aimed the sharp metal edge of the shovel directly at the dog's exposed neck. "Die, you trash!" he screamed over the thunder. He swung the shovel down with all his strength, intending to sever the animal's spine and end this game once and for all. "Stop!" A blinding beam of light suddenly cut through the darkness, hitting Brutus squarely in the eyes. "Drop it!" roared a commanding voice. A police officer charged through the rain like a linebacker, his boot connecting with the shovel and kicking it out of the maniac's hands just inches from the dog's head. The officer shoved the cold barrel of his gun directly into Brutus's sweating face. "Touch that animal again, and you're a dead man," he whispered, his voice shaking with a terrifying rage. Brutus stumbled back, raising his hands in mock surrender. "Relax, cop. It's just a giant rat digging up the graves." While the men argued above him, the dying dog used his last ounce of fading strength. He didn't look at his savior. He didn't care about the fight. He plunged his head deep into the muddy hole, submerging his face in the freezing water, searching for the only thing that mattered. He grabbed something with his teeth, something soft that shouldn't be in the ground. He pulled. He groaned with effort, and then his strength gave out. He collapsed sideways, dropping a soggy, mud-covered cardboard box right at the officer's heavy boots. The dog looked up at the policeman, his tail giving a weak, hopeful thump against the wet ground. It was the saddest sound the officer had ever heard. "Please." The dog's eyes seemed to scream through the dirt and blood. "Don't look at me. Look at what I found." The officer kicked Brutus aside and stared down at the box. For a second, nothing happened. Then it moved. A tiny, weak cry came from inside the wet cardboard. It wasn't an animal sound. It sounded like the cry of a newborn baby, muffled by the rain. With trembling hands, the officer tore the box open. The teenagers stopped laughing and lowered their phones. Brutus stopped smiling and went pale. Inside the box wasn't a stolen bone. It was a puppy, a living, breathing creature curled into a ball. It was a tiny white puppy that had been sealed in a plastic bag and buried alive. The huge, filthy dog hadn't been digging a grave to desecrate it. He had been digging to save his brother. He had taken a shovel to the spine just to buy his family one more minute of air. The officer looked up at the silent crowd with an expression of pure, unfiltered disgust. "He's more human than any of you," he spat, scooping the shivering puppy up and wrapping it tightly inside his dry jacket. "You stood here and watched a hero bleed." At the veterinary clinic, the scene was chaotic. Doctors and nurses fought for 3 hours to warm the frozen body of the little survivor. It was a desperate battle against the cold that had almost claimed a life. The silence in the room was only broken by the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitors. The big dog, now cleaned of the mud but covered in bandages, refused to leave the room. He paced back and forth on 3 legs, ignoring his own pain. His eyes were fixed on the doctor's, and occasionally he would press his wet nose against the glass of the observation room, leaving a foggy mark. The puppy was placed in a specialized incubator to regulate its body temperature. For a long time, it didn't move. The silence in the room grew heavy and suffocating. Everyone held their breath, fearing that help had arrived just a few minutes too late. Then a miracle happened. The puppy's tiny chest rose with a deep, sudden breath. It opened its eyes, revealing bright blue irises. A weak but determined bark echoed in the sterile room, a sound of defiance against death. Hearing that sound, the beast wagged his tail for the very first time since the ordeal began. His scary, defensive growl was gone, replaced by soft, high-pitched whimpers of pure joy. He knew deep down that his sacrifice had not been in vain. The officer, who had stayed through the entire surgery, made a decision that would change his life. He signed the adoption papers right there on the counter. He knew he couldn't separate the 2 souls that fate and tragedy had brought together. He gave them names that reflected their true nature, washing away the labels the town had given them. The little survivor was named Lucky, for obvious reasons, and the big white shepherd mix, he was named Angel. Because on the darkest, stormiest night of the year, when everyone else saw a demon, he was the only light in the darkness. He was a guardian sent to protect the innocent. Lucky grew fast in his new home. He was no longer a shivering victim, but a playful, happy dog who loved to chase butterflies in the park. He never knew the horror of the grave. He only knew the warmth of a loving home. Angel watched over him like a vigilant big brother. The dog that people once threw stones at was now the gentlest guardian you could imagine. He would let Lucky climb all over him, never growling, always patient, always watching. The officer's life changed too. Coming home to these 2 gave him a peace he had never known in his empty house. It was no longer just a building. It was a home full of life, gratitude, and unconditional love. Now, when people walk past the old Ravenwood Cemetery, the legend of the monster is gone. The fear has been washed away by the rain of that faithful night. The locals speak now with shame, but also with respect for the creature they misunderstood. Instead of lurking in shadows, waiting for a stone to be thrown, you will see 2 dogs running freely in the town park. Their tails wag in unison, painting a picture of pure freedom and happiness. Their story became a legend of a different kind, a lesson for the whole town about judgment and prejudice. It taught them that evil doesn't always look like a monster, and good doesn't always look like a hero. Sometimes The scariest looking creatures possess the kindest hearts of all. And true heroes? They don't always wear capes or badges. Sometimes they just wear collars, have paws full of mud, and are willing to take a blow to save a friend.